and welcome to Group Chat. I am Justin Verrier, and joining me, Rob Mahoney, Big Woz. Woz, I was looking through the photos of the Vanity Fair party. You know how they have those all out after the Oscars every night? I didn't see you. What happened? You didn't get the invite?
I was in New York, man. Come on, man. I'm in New York right now, at least for one more day, and so I missed the Vanity Fair party. But there's always next year.
I feel like this is the life you lead, though. Is every time I see seemingly innocuous party photos of celebrities, I will at least do a quick scan of the background for Woz to see if he's like laughing at a Steph Curry joke somewhere back there.
No, like, listen, NBA holidays, you can find me at pretty much all of these little elbow rubbing situations where
the activations
where NBA media gets to hang out with actually important people. But the Hollywood stuff is a little bit dicier. It's a little bit harder to get into. You guys will not be surprised. I did take a little cursory couple of texts and emails to try to figure out how to get into the Golden Globe party in LA.
Feelers.
Okay.
Put some feelers out there. I got like 40% there. I didn't push the issue, but I feel pretty positive that I could get into the Globes next year. After party, not the actual award.
Yeah.
Wow. Which one of us are you bringing as your plus one?
Oh, good question.
Hey, man, I'm throwing that up for grabs. You guys got to fight it out.
Highest bidder.
I'll hit you up, Woz. We're going to do some soft lobbying for 2026.
That's right. What was it the other day that Woz told us, like, man, you don't know, like, maybe I'll get there eventually. Was it Congress? Was it like a seat in the political system?
I wouldn't doubt it.
And Woz was like, there's a possibility down the road. I forgot what it was, but it was some seat of power.
You just be surprised who's a fan and a listener to this podcast. You guys would be shocked the amount of prominent people who care about the shit that we do up here.
We speak directly to the rich and powerful, I think. We're in their ears, influencing how they feel about Jordan Poole on a daily basis. Like, I think we're doing the work.
Yes, I've always said I'm the NBA media version of Maddie and Glace. So, there's no surprises there, guys.
Well, they celebrated Hollywood's biggest stars last night. We're going to celebrate the NBA's biggest shitheads. We're talking...
That's rude. That's
the
rude.
No Top Power Rankings, the annual exercise we go through the worst situations in the NBA. But we have to start first and foremost with, unfortunately, a team that I think is going to factor into our rankings, the Philadelphia 76ers, who unfortunately lost Joel Embiid for the season, if you could consider what he's done thus far, really participating in the season. He only played 19 games this year, 8-11 with Embiid there. He got shut down for the rest of the season. I think the really dire part of this is, whenever athlete gets shut down and has surgery, it's always like, oh, we expect a full recovery. He'll be back for training camp the next year. This one, it was just like, oh, I don't know. Rob, what did you think about this news? I guess it was expected for pretty much the entire season.
Yeah, if not the entire season, then certainly lately. And so, it just felt like business as usual for the Sixers and the way things have gone. This was a confirmation that I think not only we were looking for, but I'm sure the team was looking for in some ways. Just make this official, make it clear which direction the team is going. The Sixers need to lose games, and they probably need to lose more games than they are currently, which is saying something. But this is where things have gone for them. I didn't see any other way out for Philly other than to take this path, let Joel come back as cautiously as possible, try to keep your pick, maximize the opportunities for some of the guys further down the roster, a la Quentin Grimes, going absolutely bonkers right now. What else can you do?
Yeah, it was headed this way. I'm pretty sure it was Lisa Salters who broke the news on an ESPN broadcast that she talked to Joel, and he was like, yeah, I'm thinking about probably getting a surgery at the end of the season. And everybody was like, wait, hold on. Like, if your knee is to the point where you're already thinking about surgery, then what are you doing right now? Why isn't Joel just shutting it down immediately and, rehabbing and worrying about next year and doing everything that he can to stay on the court? And so it felt like it was going this way from the beginning. And I think what sucks is that, people kind of question the idea that he would have, played in the Olympics and just not done what he's doing now much earlier, which is, basically 8, 9, 10 months ago started this process. And I understand why he wanted to get in this season with the revamped squad, a new all-star teammate, all of this stuff, wanting to, challenge for an NBA title, finally get out the second round. But yeah, this is a big, big, big bummer, even if we saw it coming for months now.
Yeah, I think that's the worry. There isn't any like sort of prescription or any sort of surgery that's on the docket right now. If anything, the reporting from Shams Charania and other people suggests like they just want to shut him down so they can come up with a solution. It sounds like there might even still be some disagreements about how to approach it, both between Joel and from the Sixers' perspective. I think this just like it's become so bad. And Embiid, as he has in the past, wants to play through these things just to prove that he's like not this injury prone guy. I think it's just caused clashing up and down. So I don't know where you go from here. I mean, we don't know. We're not doctors, except for perhaps Woz on his free time. But I do think this is the sort of situation where we have to start worrying about Joel's entire future in the NBA. This is now so persistent with his legs, not even before he got to the league in his first couple of years, but now it's becoming year to year where it's like, is he going to play? Is he going to play next year? Is he going to play the year after that? It's all up for grabs.
Yeah, and by association, the future of the Sixers as a whole and the direction of that team. And so how do you want to navigate this, JV? Because as you said, we're doing no power rankings today. Spoiler alert, the Sixers are on my list of the 5 teams whose future I would least like to be a part of or invest in, or I feel least confident about. Do you want to jump straight to Philly on our list? Do you want to go 1 to 5, 5 to 1? How do you want to go from here?
Well, before we pivot to the rankings, I just want to ask you guys about the rest of their season. Like we can get to beyond that after that. Rob, you kind of laid out there that you think their best course of action is to tank this out, just try to keep their pick, which is top 6 protected.
Yeah.
Here's my question. Like, might they find themselves in a situation where they can't control that? Because on the one hand, like there's still good players on this team. Paul George is still playing for as long as he is. Like Tyrese Maxey still out there. Quentin Grimes putting up 44. They might can only be so bad in part because the Bulls right in front of them, right, I think would also love to get worse in the standings. So I wonder, like, can you tank your way to a pick here, or are they going to end up in a situation where they're playing the play-in regardless of how they feel about this?
I think they're going to end up in a situation that is terrifying for them and is sort of a cruel inversion of the lottery nights that Philly has had in recent history, right? Where they're hoping to strike it big with the first overall pick. I think this lottery night is going to be so much more tenuous because they're going to be right on that borderline of whether they get to keep the pick or not. And it may come down to whether a team with worse lottery odds jumps them into the high lottery and nudges them out in the process. Like, there's just so many worst case scenario outcomes for them here. And honestly, if they end up in that sort of 7-8 range and have to convey the pick this year after everything that they've been through with nothing to show for it. And I say that not just in terms of the pick itself, but the developmental opportunities have been pretty scant. You know a little more about Gershon Yabusele as an NBA player than you did a couple months ago. That's great. But it's not like there were a bunch of young guys on this team who have thrived with the newfound responsibility that they've had. It's not like Tyrese Maxey has taken a great leap forward. If anything, I think you've exposed some of the limitations of what he can be to you as a creator and as a primary driver of offense, given how much he's had to do for them this season. So I hope for their sake that they come out of this with their own pick. And to me, the only clear way to try to do that is to proceed as cautiously as possible, not just around Embiid, but around Paul George, around whatever pieces of the rotation you need to selectively withhold and mind their knees and mind their feet and try to get everyone ready for next season. Like that's really the only thing that the Sixers are playing for.
Yeah, I could kind of go the other way on this. Just the idea that they would just, sit Maxey for no reason, and Paul George, who's barely lifted a freaking finger this entire year, and be like, oh, he's got a strange groin or something, ailment, calf that's keeping him out. I mean, like, having the Sixers tanked enough.
If Paul George is already getting shots to be able to play, I don't think you're inventing reasons, right?
That's
you're just
fair.
at a certain point, you're just being responsible about it.
That's
but
fair.
He just quit his podcast in order for the stretch run to be his best self.
The hiatus cannot be for naught, They must charge bravely forward.
I would just like to see these guys try to be competitive, show some pride for the season. Just the idea that they would just roll out the end of their bench and start giving the scrubs 20 minutes a night so that they could pursue, a 6th pick in the draft. Like, I understand logically. I get it, guys. I'm not an idiot. I understand why you would want to take a crack at a top 6 talent in this draft. That's not lost on me. But at the same time, like Quentin Grimes just went out and dropped 40. Why not have him playing for something?
Yeah.
Feeling like these games actually matter, that could actually serve this team going forward. Why shouldn't Maxey be trying to, learn how to navigate being the actual man? And again, like we talk about teams that show signs at the end of seasons before, sort of on the pre-call. Why can't the Sixers be that kind of team that shows signs in the late stages of the season that they carry into next year? That's what I would honestly like to see them do, rather than the Sixers again tanking for picks.
Yeah, on the one hand, we'll see about Paul George. I would be surprised, considering he made such a show of shutting down the podcast, that he would shut down the rest of his season. And on the one hand, he's been so bad that I almost wonder if he plays more, that actually helps their tanking odds. On the other hand, when he does play more of like
he hasn't been that bad.
He's been pretty bad.
I mean, he's been
but
bad in a big picture winning sense, yes, but in a tanking sense, Paul George is not driving the tank.
Well, actually, he made such a stink out of playing more of a big man position. I actually like him, considering just the lack of athletic pop that he's had this year, playing more of like the 4 and, God forbid, like a small ball center next to the guy who's actually going to take the pounding, and like a Yabusele and whatnot. I think actually he fits there if he's not going to have the same athleticism, be the same sort of athletic freak that we've known from the past. So we'll see about that. But I do like the idea of giving guys some shots, because this is where Daryl Morey has always thrived, finding guys in the bargain bin. It almost feels like, at the end of Casino, where he's like retreated back to his like San Diego home, and he's like, but I could always pick a winner, so they let me alone and just let me just make money for them. That's Daryl Morey right now, just bringing in Jalen Hood-Schifino and these type of guys in there.
Yeah.
Rob, are these any sort of these like low level bargain bin guys? Lonnie Walker is now back in the NBA and with the Sixers. Is there any one of those you like more than the others?
I mean, I think we all agree that Lonnie Walker is probably an NBA player. He's just in that fringe bracket that one year to the next could swing out and end up in Europe, clearly, or end up playing overseas. I find myself really liking Jared Butler as a prospect, as someone to throw into the mix, but not necessarily the kind of player you're going to build a team around, or even build a rotation around, or even necessarily guarantee a spot to next season. But here's where I agree with this is, the Sixers could really benefit from having some pressure from the bottom part of the roster, guys who are threatening to play more, threatening to do more, in a way that, like, this is a strangely veteran team for a group that is in the position that they are. You need some of that juice. Like, you need some of that drive. You need some guys who are, an Andre Drummond type, who's kind of being gifted minutes and not doing a lot with them this season, to feel like his job is actually on the line. And I think that's a healthy thing for a team in their position. And there's just not enough of that with where they are right now. And you would hope with guys like Butler, with guys like Hood-Schifino, who they're bringing in, with guys like Lonnie Walker, who's fighting for his NBA life in some senses, that maybe you can get some of that desperate energy back, because the Sixers have been anything but desperate.
They hollowed out their entire roster in order to get Paul George. So they just need bodies just to fill out the rotation. And they've done that thus far. Quentin Grimes, a revelation. I've loved Quentin Grimes
it's really good.
God knows, like 2 years at this point. Was surprised that the Mavs dealt him. I mean, it's tough to figure out what's going on with Dallas these days, but I have to assume, like, just because Quentin Grimes, what's funny is he's the exact listed height and weight as Caleb Martin, but he definitely doesn't play as nasty as Caleb Martin, and it seems like Dallas just likes the histrionics of certain guys, the theater of being tough and rugged. But Grimes is a much better shooter, better scorer. We saw that against the Warriors.
Isn't as nasty, you mean he doesn't go through like a 2-week stretch where he makes 0 threes?
Right. The shooting numbers are what's actually nasty. Yeah. Grimes is just an awesome shooter, and for whatever reason, teams keep giving up on him. I don't know if he's the type of guy who just plays not as hard as like you'd expect, but I love the talent. I think that was a good
he could
pickup.
also be a guy whose attitude can sour from time to time.
Sure.
That's been the book on him, is that, when things aren't going his way, that he can be a bit of a, I don't want to say a sulker. I don't think that's too harsh, but like, yeah.
Well, there's the part of it that I understand and the part of it that I don't. The part of it that I understand, if Dallas didn't believe in Quentin Grimes, and Jason Kidd at least did not believe in Quentin Grimes, and clearly Nico Harrison didn't to a certain degree, you don't want to pay him as an upcoming free agent. That doesn't really make sense. And so you trade him for a guy who's on a guaranteed contract, who maybe you do believe in a little more. Okay, that checks out. I don't agree with the evaluation, but I understand the logic. the other part is this, which is like, why didn't you trust him in the first place? And that's where, Waz, I think you're probably onto something. The distinction is Quentin Grimes a difficult player to work with who sours on situations, or was it just not a compatible personality, right? Between him and Kidd, or him and teammates, or him and whoever. Like, there's situations in which a guy is a problem, and there's situations in which a guy just isn't a good fit. And I think we're going to find out which one is true for Quentin Grimes pretty quickly.
Sounds like a perfect Daryl Morey player. Like, he has so much talent, but like, I don't know, personality wise, let's just get the talent in there and we'll figure out the rest of it. I will say there's like a nice little like alternate reality forming for the Sixers if they do end up keeping their pick. Let's say they get like a top 5 player in a draft that has been like suggested is like, first 5 to 6 guys could really make a difference for your franchise. Then you have Grimes in there. Then you have some of these other guys you're bringing up from the feeder system. Then it's like, oh, we might be able to switch our timeline on the fly here where it's like Tyrese Maxey plus whatever the future holds. Whereas right now it seems like they're so beholden to Embiid and Paul George just because of the contracts that they're on. And I almost wonder if they could have their cake and eat it too if they do some of these things right toward the end of the season. So I guess maybe not the basketball itself will be fun, but the stakes seem pretty big for a team that, as we mentioned, has been in the dregs of the league for the entire season.
How realistic is it that they could move on from 2 $50 million players?
Let's save that. Let's save that for the future power rankings. I feel like that's the crux of that. Or sorry, the no power rankings. That's kind of the crux of the discussion.
The Ringer NBA show is brought to you by FanDuel. It's Super Trade Day, and you can celebrate three-pointers all day long on FanDuel. Because right now, all customers can boost their winnings with a 30% profit boost on same-game parlays. That means you can get a bigger payout when you bet an NBA same-game parlay. So we're looking at the Trade Day section on FanDuel. And I like, believe it or not, Scoot Henderson. Yeah, that's right. I went with the Trailblazer. Scoot Henderson, minus 770 to hit 1 or more made three-pointers. Have you looked at Scoot over the last, 2 months or so? I think the last time he didn't hit a 3 in a game that he played in was the end of January. So he's on a little bit of a streak here. He plays a lot. The Trailblazers have had some injuries, so he's getting about 25 to 30 minutes a game. And his shooting has been pretty good pretty much all season long. So give me Scoot minus 770 to hit 1 or more made threes. And parlay anytime, three-pointers, points, assists, rebounds, and so much more with America's #1 sportsbook. And best of all, when you win, you'll get paid instantly. So visit FanDuel.com/RingerNBA and turn every splash into cash all day long. Must be 21 plus and present in select states or 18 plus and present in DC. Opt-in required. Minimum 3-leg parlay required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable profit boost tokens. Restrictions apply, including any token expiration and max wager amount. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit rg-help.com. So we each came with our bottom 5 situations from this point going forward. I think we'll have a lot of the same teams, but I'm curious who you guys have. Do you want to just start with the Sixers, or do you want to start for number 5 with you guys?
Let's start from number 5, and we'll wind our way wherever the Sixers end up falling.
Okay, Rob. Then who do you have at number 5?
I have the Charlotte Hornets at number 5. The 14-45 Charlotte Hornets. Do you guys have them on your list?
Yes,
I do not. But honorable mention.
Yes.
Yeah, I think they're on the borderline, which is fair because on the one hand, Charlotte is very bad this season. You will hear no argument from anybody. But LaMelo plus Brandon Miller, once he comes back from his wrist injury, plus one more high-level prospect through a lottery pick, that's a pretty viable core, especially for a team that, I don't think we say this enough, like Charles Lee has these guys playing pretty decent defense, like pretty respectably on that side of the floor. It's just that when you take it all into account, you want a little more momentum out of a season like this one. There's a lot of interesting prospects, guys who I have my eye on, but I'm not I'm not seeing Nick Smith Jr. and seeing a real pop. I'm seeing what could be. And
I'm Sonic, Nick Smith Jr.?
Potential future Sonic. And even Mark Williams, who I think we like his offensive game and what he can be as a lob finisher. It's a tough look to come out of a season like this and say a competitive team nixed acquiring you because of health concerns. Doesn't make you feel great about the Hornets' immediate future. And so this is a team that I think has an interesting trajectory and has enough going for it where I'm keeping my eye on them. That's why they're not number 1 on this list. Is the worst situation in the league, but they do have a long way to go.
The reason why they're number 5 on my list, like they have nice young talent, right? when you talk about LaMelo Ball, who was on the edges of the All-Star conversation. A lot of people felt like he was the biggest snub of the game. So you have a guy averaging 30. People think he's a bona fide All-Star. Obviously, Brandon Miller gets a lot of love on this show. Like, we love Brandon Miller universally between the three of us. And then their second best player is probably Miles Bridges. And I think that's the problem for the Hornets for me, is that your two best players are LaMelo Ball and Miles Bridges. And the idea that you were going to build winning NBA habits while emphasizing those two as the centerpieces of your rebuilding or building operation, I think that's a dubious sort of idea at best. The idea that you can have those two guys as the nucleus of something meaningful going forward. And so that's why I have them on the list. I think they have, like, if you just stripped away the sort of work requirements of an NBA franchise and how you build something that sustains and lasts and can be meaningful in terms of winning going forward, they have talent that would suggest, like, oh, okay, we can be optimistic about what they do. But once you factor in the actual personalities of the people involved, that's when you start to be like, I don't know if, like, doing something different around the quote unquote nucleus of this core wouldn't be the best path forward.
I do like that they have made some smart business decisions ever since the new ownership took over. We've seen throughout the NBA over the course of we've been doing this pod, like, new owners doing stupid things. They've done the complete opposite, where they've almost been overly prudent and, like, thinking more in the long term after years and years and years of the Charlotte Hornets just playing for that season, just trying to get the A seed. Michael Jordan just trying to ram in, like, a college all-star into a team that's just, like, already fine to begin with. I just like that they're looking at this, like, big picture. They haven't said, like, LaMelo Ball, we got to take advantage of what he is. We got to build around him and build a winner right now. If anything, they're like, maybe LaMelo Ball isn't our guy. Maybe it's actually Brandon Miller plus whatever we get down the road. And I think both Rob and I have talked in the past about Saloon and just, like, how he doesn't really have a lot of the ball skills that you'd want from an NBA basketball player. But I like that approach in the draft, because in a draft like last year's, where it was basically a crapshoot to begin with, you had a lot of teams picking from need as opposed to future potential. Like, they were thinking, like, let's just hit a home run. We have a top pick. If it doesn't work out, who cares? We're just going to keep being as bad as possible to be as good as possible down the road. And I appreciate that perspective as opposed to someone like a different team that's just, like, right in the middle and trying to figure things out just to be, like, for instance, the Bulls. I mean, the Bulls would be the perfect counter example to this.
I hear you. I mean, people do care if Solon hits or not. Like, it's very important to their team if he hits or not. And as I stated before, I'm just, like, waiting to see whatever it was that they saw in him, because he fades into the background of a lot of games. He doesn't have a lot of skills that, like, really jump out at you. I want him to be good, but I find myself just wanting a lot from him.
He looks like an MMA fighter. I think that's what they saw in him.
He certainly has the
giant
build.
Athlete. Yeah,
I think that's what you're banking on, is, like, positional flexibility, defending multiple spots, like, you know, a new age forward, a new age wing. Like, I can get that part of it. I just don't see the overall cohesive game, and maybe it will come in time. Like, again, these are all future situations, and we're waiting to see with them. I think having LaMelo under contract for 4 more years is a pretty good situation for Charlotte. Like, you don't have quite as much pressure to, as you say, Justin, accelerate things really quickly in the way the previous regime did, speed into the skid. Like, you can take your time with this thing a little bit more. And I think there's a pretty decent demarcation between 4 and 5 for me. Like, I have the Hornets at 5. I don't think they're in a bad situation. I just think that the NBA doesn't have a lot of terrible situations right now. There are some teams with bad vibes. There's some teams their season has gone off the rails. But overall, Charlotte has good young players. They have Dallas's 2027 first-round pick, which could turn out to be quite good.
Pretty nice.
And they have, like, a good coach who's, like, building something there. So I think there's enough there to like. It's just that they haven't really started putting it all together just yet.
There's a long-term vision where it seems like everybody's aligned on how they're moving forward. And I can't say that about the team I have at number 5, which is the Chicago Bulls, who seems like they finally got the message.
That's my question. Only 5.
Oh, you have them higher. Oh,
yeah.
I think, like, the other teams are just so much worse. And at the end of the day, like, I do think market muscle matters when you get to a certain point. Like, could the Bulls, if they show enough in the next 2 to 3 years, like, attract a star free agent there? Maybe, probably not. They haven't in a very long time.
Yeah.
But I think it's within the realm of possibility at the very least. You've seen guys go to Brooklyn when there's absolutely nothing there, or just like go to the Clippers, who like have just been clearly the number 2 team in that market for a while. So I don't know. We'll see. I also think they have some guys that I like there. They have Bazelis, who we've talked about in the last pod, is a guy with some potential. You know how much I appreciate Josh Giddey and what he brings to the table.
Yeah.
Playing very well of late. And also, like, the guys that they have left over who are veterans are now expiring contracts. So if they wanted to like make a swing, it makes sense, like Vooch and Herter. I like the second, like almost not second draft, but like second pull at Herter because he didn't work out with the Kings. It's like, let's give him a shot. If he doesn't do well, he's an expiring contract, and there he goes.
Yeah.
Collins, Kobe White's a good player. So they just like have enough stuff. And to me, that market, I think that was enough to push them ahead of the Hornets, who I probably would have had 6 if we went that low.
That's a lot of stuff that I don't feel very confident in.
No.
Okay.
And
Where do you guys have
the problem for the Bulls, I had number 2.
I also have them. I also have them number 2.
Number
Wow.
2.
Yeah.
And it's not just the players that are currently on the roster. And we think we know what direction they're going in terms of them trading Zach LaVine. Like, they're going in some youth-driven direction. Do we actually know that? Are we sure that that's what they're going to do? I just think they're so horribly mismanaged. And the fact that they don't even have a talent that they could botch, right? Like, they don't even have that where you could be like, man, they got this thing, and if they could just they don't even have that. So like the idea that they're going to draft the right guy, that they're going to bring in the surrounding pieces that matter, that the coaching is actually going to make sense around what they bring in, that there's going to be any cohesion, I have no confidence in it. Yes. And so while I like the fact that they did move on from Zach LaVine, I look at this roster, I'm just like, it's just good enough that they could be like, oh, let's add on to this offseason.
I can't believe we're still here. I can't believe we're still having this conversation about
here
the Bulls.
with the Reinsdorfs. Some of the worst owners in sports. I know we say it a lot up on the show. They don't get nearly enough of the guff that they deserve for being so horrible as owners. And Justin mentioned market might. Your owners have to act like that.
Yeah,
sure.
Your owners have to let players know, like, look, we may not be the Lakers or we may not be the Knicks in terms of money and blah, 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 but we're going to make you feel like we are, some top of the line organization in some number 1 media market, blah, blah, blah. They don't act like that. They treat this shit like it's a freaking, AA league. So that's why I still see the future of the Bulls as bleak as hell.
Yeah, I think for this exercise, there's the question of like, what players on these teams do you believe in? And the Bulls have some players I believe in. I think Buzelis is the most interesting prospect they have going forward, a guy that I'm eager to see what he can become, and I think he could probably be quite good. But then there's the question of like, what front offices do you believe in, and what ownership groups do you believe in? And I just don't think we have any reason to think that the Bulls know what they're doing at all. It is bad process after bad process after bad process. It's waiting too long on guys they should have traded. It's holding on to guys they should have traded. It's selling low when you shouldn't sell low. It's giving Pat Williams one of the worst contracts in the league when he's shown absolutely no capacity to earn it. And so like all of these things, like I see a team that, as you're saying, JV, like there are some spots on it that like these are real NBA players. Kobe White's a good player. He's also due for a significant raise in a year. And now all of a sudden he's one of the best players on your team, if not the best player on your team. And what kind of direction does that put you in going forward? And how does that handcuff you when your future is Buzelis putting it together as quickly as possible? Kobe White, who we like, Lonzo Ball, whether he can stay healthy, Josh Giddey, who I understand he's playing a little better lately. I understand that the Bulls have some wins. I can promise you I'm not moved by it. Wow. Like we have seen quite a body of work from both in Chicago. He has been perfectly fine. And
come on.
I am not in a rush to tether my future or the future of my franchise, as the Bulls will have to do, to Josh Giddey.
Well, they have plenty of funds coming up, so they could splash as much money in Giddey's way as they want to. But I think you guys are right. If you're looking at this from an organizational standpoint, you're looking at ownership first and foremost. I would say on this list, maybe second worst. We'll talk about the team that I have at number 1 later on. But yes, there's now a long track record to suggest that whomever is making the decisions, whoever is playing these games, it might not matter because of what they're doing in the ownership box. The one thing I will say, though, is that Jimmy Dolan managed to attract some free agents to the Garden, and if he could do it, then I think like the Reinsdorfs can probably do it too. So I don't know. When it comes down to it, like I'm always gonna factor in that and give the edge to a Chicago than a Charlotte when we're talking about like NBA stars. Freedom of will, their choice of where they want to live their lives is a major factor in how good a team is first and like now and then in the future.
Well, and all the Knicks had to do to get that free agent was employ his dad as an assistant coach and then take a gigantic moonshot on a player who had been pretty good and turned out to be a freaking star. Like, all due respect to the Knicks, but Jalen Brunson is not a normal free agent situation.
If anything, that's more likely that they could do that than get AD to come back home to Chicago.
They would have to scout the next Jalen Brunson, and I do not trust the Bulls to do that.
But part of it too, guys, is like, forget the free agent. It's sort of the pre-agency. You have to have the guy that somebody, if they don't sign with you in free agency, forces a team to get you to, right? Like Jimmy being like, all right, I'll okay a trade to Steph Curry. Yeah. You know, or Dame, who unsuccessfully, but was like, I want to go to Miami. He has a really close relationship with a Bam Adebayo, right? Sure. Like, who the hell do the Bulls have that somebody's going to be like, yeah, no, I want to pair up with him. Like, they don't even
Taylor
have...
Horton Tucker.
Yeah. Oh, my God. Talk about
He's
bad
big
body.
in the clutch system.
Lord have mercy.
Well,
Jesus.
Here's how I look at it. Like
he's got a dad body at 25. It's just nasty.
Which happens to all of us.
Yeah, I don't criticize that one. That's very relatable.
What if the Bulls luck into the number 1 or number 2 pick? They have Dylan Harper right now, and he just ends up being incredible. He's the new Darren Williams or whatever you want to say.
Different
or
story,
Cooper Flag.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like they can make that pivot way quicker than a team like Charlotte could, for instance. Like, or a team that's starting from scratch, like the Utah Jazz. Like, who the hell is Utah going to attract down to Utah? Like, if Ace Bailey all of a sudden becomes a free agent, like 5 to 7 years down the road, and he's just as good as Harper, like you don't think he would want to come to Chicago as opposed to like the reverse in Utah? That matters, I think.
I think that does matter. I like Utah's situation significantly more, to the point that...
Are they not on your list?
They're not on my list.
Whoa!
No. They're knocking on my list, but they're just not messy enough. And, you know, you have some level of respect for Danny Ainge's ability to build a winner. But, like, to be honest, like, they're kind of the Bulls with better management structure and, you know, a lot more picks.
We'll save that for when it comes up on Justin's list. But so we've all done our 5. Waz, who do you have at 4?
Oh, the Wizards.
Okay.
I don't really like any of their young players. To me, they're going to be tanking for the next 3 years. There's nothing to be excited. Like, look, I like Cool about, like, he has a great physical attribute for a wing. It's like, wow, his physicality, his physical traits hop off the page. I don't think he's going to be our next Anthony Edwards, Devin Booker, whatever type of wing. Like, I don't see that. Maybe you guys do. I don't. Like Sarr is little shit that we've seen of him. Look, he looks like he has some great potential defensive upside. Like, there's nothing here that would indicate that, like, you know, a Rockets of last year, not even this year, of last year is on the horizon for them. I don't see it. And so they're my 4th team because, like, look, they're doing the right thing. They're accumulating young draft guys and assets and all of that stuff. But, like, boy, like, are you guys, like, obsessed with Kispert? Like, are you guys, like, see Kispert playing? Like, man, the future's so bright here. I don't see it.
It's not very bright.
I have them at number 2.
I have them at number 3. Yeah.
Okay. For the exact reason Waz laid out. They've basically just completely raised down the garden bed, and they're just starting anew, and they're just starting to plant new sorts of things. And so far, none of the vegetables are really looking too appealing.
We're not homeowners like you. We don't have gardens and backyards. Like, why are you explaining stuff that we don't understand at all?
Okay. It's like starting a new business on Fairfax, and all of a sudden, just putting a bunch of hype beast logos on shirts. You don't know if people will buy them, but they look cool to you. Is that better?
We got to get to Justin's house in August for the Roma tomatoes, Rob. This guy is.
Oh,
they're coming in.
Summer solstice pod. We should totally do that.
Summer solstice pod is our best bit yet. I think we got to ride that right into the ground.
That's good. So the Wizards currently have 11 wins.
Yep.
The Oklahoma City Thunder have 11 losses. That's how dire this has been. But I have to say, if we're like playing devil's advocate here, even though I have them at number 2, like the fact that this hasn't spilled over and is just like a complete catastrophe. If anything, they've like completely pushed out some of the knuckleheads, like the Kyle Kuzmas of the world. Jordan Poole's still there, but it doesn't seem like he's affecting any sort of the rebuilding process. Like Chris
semi-reformed, I would say.
I would agree. Yeah. Chris Middleton, just like a totally stand-up dude. And it just seems like they're boring, but they are at the very least following the steps, doing the hard work to get to a place that they never got with Bradley Beal. Yep. Unfortunately, like they're betting on a hope and a prayer at this point. Like I just don't think hoping for lottery luck is a plan. And so for that reason, like, what am I attracted to with this team? It's just like the fact that they're going to be in the lottery for the next 2 to 3 years.
Bob Carrington might pop.
Yeah.
He might.
But just, you said hoping for lottery luck isn't a plan, but that was just the plan you laid out for the Chicago Bulls, is hope and pray that you get Cooper Flagg and then maybe your team will be saved. That's
fair, but then you have to factor in the market as well.
It's very true. Like the Wizards, to the extent that anything is happening here, it is a long way away from happening. And I think that's also a problem with their veterans too, who, look, you don't need me to stump for Chris Middleton on this podcast. I like Marcus Smart fine. I think Jordan Poole has had a respectable turnaround for his season. All 3 of those guys, if you wanted to move them, would be very tricky to move and would take some doing. Just given where they are in their careers, the amount of money that they're owed, their injury histories in some cases, it's not a very malleable team. And so then you have all of these young players who you're trying to find time and space for. You know, you're trying to make sure that Keyshawn George can be the best that he can be. You want to, I think Corey Kispert's probably in the middle ground of this, where he's not as young as the Koulibaly types, but clearly not quite part of the veteran core. Maybe he's someone who has a market if you wanted to move things around, but why would you? That's kind of where the Wizards are. Like, they don't have any kind of definitive direction. They don't have a singular prospect or 2 that give them momentum in what they're trying to build. And Alex Sarr, to the extent that he could ever be that, probably will not be for some years. So they just have to be on this list. They just don't have enough going for them, and they are so bad at present that they couldn't quite, there's no way they could justify their way out of it.
How many of these guys that are playing on this team right now are going to be on the final version that they expect to be pretty good? It's probably Koulibaly, probably Sarr. Is it anybody else? Do you like any of these other guys, Rob?
Not enough to make that kind of claim. I think everything else is, honestly, even those guys, I would say, are not exactly like nailed down as Washington Wizards. It's all very ad hoc. And I think we're going to see what the Wizards value and how those guys develop. Like, there's just so many variables stacked on variables with guys who are 19 and 20 and 21 years old. And I don't really trust basically any of them.
Waz, you're a big Justin Champagnie guy, right? I've heard you just talking about his converted 2A.
He's one of my faves for sure. Just been just grinding the tape on that Champagnie kid.
They just locked him down though. Shout out to Justin Champagnie. Like, yeah, honestly, good workaday NBA player.
The Champagnie family is having a real come up this
it's very
past couple months. Yeah. So I had them at 2. Rob, you had them where? 3?
I had them at 3.
And Waz had them at 4. Do you want to do your number 4, Rob?
Yeah, my number 4 is the Philadelphia 76ers.
Same.
I think I just reached a point where we've talked about the vibes being horrendous in Philly, and they are. They have these 2 massive contracts with Embiid and Paul George that make it difficult to basically do anything around the edges or to dramatically reimagine what this team would look like. But at the end of the day, they have, at minimum, Tyrese Maxey, and at minimum, whatever Joel Embiid is able to give you. And that's just far and away better from a player perspective than any other team we're really even considering here. So there's only so far that they can fall. I think what puts them on this list for me, and puts them on this list at 4, is that they are just the biggest quagmire in the entire league. They don't have any direction they can go that feels good. And so while they might not be the worst team on paper or the least talented team, it's like if they continue on their current course, their seasons will ride and die with the health of a star who probably will never be himself ever again. And that's a terrible thing to have to say. And I hate that we're here with Joel, but the history speaks for itself. The team itself is trying to, all the reports are pointing to these radical treatment methods and radical explorations just to not to get him back to who he was, but to get him to the point that he can play through seasons. That's now your future if you want to continue along this path. I think they can come back as currently constructed and be decent next year. reasonably healthy, they can be a decent team, but the ceiling on them feels so low, and it feels like it could give out at basically any moment.
Dude, they're talking about resurrecting from the dead the microfracture surgery that we had long since buried as a viable option when people are having this particular problem with their knee. People are so out of answers as to how to fix Joel Embiid's knee situation that these are the conversations we're having. And they're my number 3 team. And the reason why, I think if Paul George and Joel Embiid at their $50 million plus a year contracts, if they could play 65 games a year at a diminished version of themselves, and we just allowed Maxey to work in with diminished versions of an all-star, all-time big when he's right, and Paul George, who has like been a 10-year, damn near 10-time all-star in his freaking career, you could still be damn good doing that. The problem is that there can't be any expectation that these guys would even play 50 games next year. And then like moving these guys,
yeah,
where you're like, oh, let's just get off of the money. Let's, try to get some picks or maybe some exciting young guys, or like, I don't know how you trade for Joel Embiid at his number.
I think it would cost the Sixers if they tried to move
Yes.
these guys. Not that there's zero market, but the market would be so complex, they would probably have to give things up in some fashion to accommodate a Paul George trade or a Joel Embiid trade.
I don't know. I mean, so in 2028, 2029, when you'll be listening to this podcast with VR goggles on, or like simulated versions of us doing the podcast as we're like feeding them in via AI, that is when Joel Embiid will be making $67 million USD, $67 million. He's currently 30. He'll be about 34 around then. I don't know, man. I would not, if I'm an organization at any point in my life cycle and I could fit that into my book, I would not do it. It's just like it's just so scary. Like, you don't know if this guy's going to play or not. And if he does play, is he going to be all that effective? When the Sixers had Maxey, Embiid, and Paul George on the court together this year, 7-8. Sub 500 team. So it's not like when he's playing, he's awesome. If anything, like he's shown significant signs of being worse defensively. And then he's just so big and so heavy. Like, man, I think there's just going to be natural atrophy for that player, regardless of the injury situation. So I have him at number 4. I think because there's such this like doubt, or like we don't know what's going to happen medically with Embiid or Paul George, we should point out. I think there's like a possibility that Rob laid out, like they could be okay, but I don't know where they get better than that. And I think if we knew more about the injuries, I think they could easily be number 1 on this list.
I think better than that would have to include hitting it big in the lottery, which means keeping their pick in the first place, which, as we said, is huge. a little touch and go right now. Jared McCain coming back and being a real impact player again, in a way that he barely had a chance to prove in his rookie season. And then, yeah, you're either using that pick to cash in on a player who is relevant immediately, which is, I would say, more common now for rookies than maybe it has been historically, but we'll have to see with this draft class where they end up, or flipping that pick for someone who can actually contribute to the Sixers now, which I think would be a perfectly reasonable and valuable enterprise to kind of like knock on some doors and make some phone calls and see what kind of like good rotation veteran you could get for that pick. But that's already a lot of things having to go right. And that's on top of all the health concerns. And that's on top of hoping that like this year you haven't run Maxey into the ground playing him 40 minutes a night for a season that's going nowhere.
He's an ox. He'll be straight.
I hope so.
Waz, here's a question. Going forward from this point, do you think you would rather have Paul George or Tobias Harris?
I think for championship purposes, if your team is actually trying to think they can win a championship, I'd rather have Paul George. But for what Detroit is doing, or if I was, say, Charlotte, or if I was, I don't know, Portland, or I'd rather have Tobias. Like, a competent shooting 4-man, professional, knows how to treat people, all of that. Like all of the stuff that isn't tied to his max contract that he was on in Philadelphia and his shortcomings with that. But everything outside of that,
yeah,
he's a high quality NBA player. I just don't think in like the biggest moments, that he becomes that kind of player. I think Paul George still has it in. Again, this guy was all NBA last year.
Yep.
Maybe he's not all NBA, but he's a damn solid 38-minute a game postseason player, which I don't think Tobias Harris is that anymore.
But even what you just laid out, like as you're saying, was last year, Paul George is an all NBA guy, really, really good, even in like his age right now, and with his injury history, still was able to be really highly effective. The answer last season would have been in 100% of cases, you take Paul George. Now it's like a pretty narrow window of team that would want Paul George over Tobias Harris,
which 50,
Well, just because he, as you're saying, he can't be a workaday guy anymore. He's basically become the star version of an X Factor, right? Like he is a swing piece that takes a contending team and can give them some things that they badly need, but he can't be that thing for lots of other teams. And so as you're knocking around the possibilities of, can the Sixers trade Paul George? I think that's worth keeping in mind, that a lot of teams out there would get more out of a Tobias Harris type player. He's not as good as Paul George. He's not close to as good as Paul George, but he has more to offer over 82 games than Paul George does.
The resurrection of Tobias Harris.
Incredible.
Everyone owes him an apology because everyone dragged him through the mud, and all of a sudden he's exactly what every young team needs, just like a solid floor raising guy who's going to shoot some threes and get the fuck out of the way. Do you think now that Paul George isn't doing one podcast a week or whatever it is, he's just going to all of a sudden click back into place? Do you think his mind just was thinking about all the in-depth questions he was going to ask his guests? Because I'll be honest, sometimes I get a little derailed on this podcast, just setting you guys up, that I can't really perform at my best. I can only see if I was like on an NBA court.
But he's not, like, with all due respect to Paul George's podcasting, he's not doing a Justin Verrier role, right? He's getting takes off.
No.
I would say it's the other guy's responsibility to set him up.
Oh my
He
God.
wishes. Yeah.
Not everyone can be a
though.
Tobias Harris, and not everyone can be a JV. You know, like these are very specialized roles, and we value them
I
deeply
think
here
all
on
you
Group
need
Chat.
to know about Paul George group chatting, Paul George podcasting is that he's the kind of guy who thinks telling people he stopped podcasting actually matters. That's all you need to know about the whole podcasting bit. That he thinks it matters, that people know this.
He's locked in.
He was locked in.
All right, number 3. Rob, you already gave your number 3, right?
Yeah, mine was the Wizards at 3. So is anyone's 3 yet unclaimed?
Yes.
Nope,
I have the Utah Jazz.
Sixers. Okay, that's interesting.
Okay, talk us through the Jazz.
I'm honestly offended that they've retanked, basically, that they went on a tanking journey, just decided that, like, all right, well, guess we'll be pretty good, and then walked that back and now have just completely bottomed out. It's like, as just a fan of basketball, I'm a little offended, and so for that reason, I have to ding them. Just like the karmic, just like disgust that is going on right now, I think is going to have some comeuppance in the near future, and so like they're
From the
planning
basketball
everything.
gods, you're saying some comeuppance.
I think so, man. They're just like so putrid, and they just don't have to be. It just, you're offending the sensibilities of this, like the karmic basketball gods that dictate everything that I'm 100% sure that they do. And so for that reason, I'm just like, what do you have? They do have some like solid role players that if they did have a Cooper Flag, a Dylan Harper, someone to come right in there, I do think they could turn this around pretty quickly. Assets are good. The picks are good. Cody Williams, not very good. But like with the Wizards, I think if you're just hoping and praying for a number 1 pick, that's not necessarily a plan. And so I do have to ding them for that.
Don't they need to tank though? Like, this is a team that hasn't
Because of
had
the
the
market?
not just the market. Well, that is a huge factor, but they haven't had the like top 3 crack at the draft yet, right? Like they've been picking in more the mid-late lottery for the most part and getting a lot of guys that, as you kind of alluded to, maybe there's something there, maybe there's not. Like, is Cody Williams ever going to be a real relevant longtime NBA player, like a pillar for a franchise? I honestly don't know. Like Isaiah Collier, fine. Keontae George, I guess he's coming on a little bit more lately. It's been a weird kind of pull the plug season on him. Bryce Sensabaugh, I can't say I'm burdened with confidence about where he is right now. I love Kessler. I think Kessler's really good. Yeah.
I think George at worst can be like a Jordan Clarkson energy scorer. You need those. Obviously, the Jazz have that in abundance right now. And then obviously Laurie's out there just waiting for someone to just let him play competitive basketball. So that's
to me, that's why they're not. That's what I'm saying. That's why they're not on my list. I do think the basketball is putrid. I do think they're as far as pretty much anybody we've mentioned so far on this list from contending for a championship. Like, I don't think they could say, like, oh, we're so much closer to championship basketball than the Wizards. I don't believe that to be the case. But I do think the building blocks are just much more proven and more exciting in terms of Laurie and Walker Kessler.
Yeah.
And, all of the picks that they've accumulated from, the Rudy deal and the Donovan deal and stuff like that. I do think there's just more there. So they were on the cusp because I just think talent-wise, there's no reason to think the Jazz are going to be knocking on the door of the Western Conference Finals for a long-ass time, right? And I think the reason that they've taken this approach is because Danny Ainge apparently is best friends with the freaking owner. So he's one of those GM job security types that can just do whatever the hell he wants. And so it's taking forever for them to even try something, to the point where they were so damn cocky, they didn't even bother tanking for Wembanyama, which was insane at the time. Okay. But I think they got enough that they stayed right at, the outside of my list.
Yeah, I think what separates them is the ability to accelerate when they want to. This feels very much like a team that's waiting for that one piece. Like, they are waiting in the same way that we said the Wizards are waiting, right? To hit the lottery, hit it big, get that one prospect in the door that can change things dramatically for you. But once they get that guy, Cooper, Flag, or otherwise, then they have all of these picks to rev up and shift gears as quickly as they want to. Like, they have an incredible amount of draft capital. And all of the guys we mentioned, some of them might hit. Like, I think Walker Kessler is already a quite good NBA player. Lauri Markkanen, as we alluded to, is not having his best year, basically because the Jazz don't want or need him to have his last year. He's kind of trying some things, developmentally speaking.
A sabbatical, basically.
He's basically on a sabbatical and is like openly experimenting with his role in these games and like the kinds of shots that he can get off. You put him alongside a point guard who is not Isaiah Collier, with all due respect, that game looks very different. Everything he's doing looks so different. So you give them one prospect, and they are in line to get that prospect through the draft. They're in line to trade multiple picks to move up if they need to. I just think they have options in a way that some of these other, 14 and 15 win teams don't.
I just like the idea of Lauri Markkanen just like taking games off to just like go to festivals. Like, you'll just see him at Lollapalooza and be like, oh, there's Lauri. He just dropped 20 on the Bulls last night, but here he is just like watching REM.
You think he's into REM? There's no way he's more into like Doja Cat than he is REM.
I was gonna say like MGMT. He likes the classics.
Love MGMT.
It just turns into the Plumlee that got really into Bonnaroo that time. Do you remember that?
I do remember that. I like the idea that
Miles.
MGMT just made it to Finland. It just made it across, since we're like, oh man, can't get enough.
So I did do my pick grading system thing that pretty much only Rob likes, but we'll just go through it yet again because I do think it's important to understanding some of these pick allotments that people have. A lot of these picks are coming from good teams. It's Cavs and Wolves at this point. Both teams, I think we would all agree, have long track records. Wolves playing more inspired lately. We got to talk about that soon on a pod.
Yeah, and even if they're playing at a 23rd pick level, like, who's getting hyped about that?
I think they have two good picks in their stash at this point, and now things can change. Like, the Cavs, injuries happen. These picks are so far out that like an entire world of possibilities out there. But right now, I would say 2031 Phoenix picks, which is an A+. It might be the absolute best pick. Although you can almost look at it as maybe it's so far out there that the Suns will basically bottom out and rebound by that point.
6 years from now.
I think you want those, though. Like, you want the uncertainty of the distance. And frankly, I think the Phoenix pick is instructive in this way, that there is a market for desperate second apron teams to trade away their potentially very good future picks for your maybe not so good Justin Verrier lower rated picks.
That was a really bad sign for Phoenix. And then they didn't really end up using most of those. So that Phoenix pick, A+ I have. Probably one of the best on the board. And then there's a 2029 Minnesota pick, which I think is interesting, if only because Anthony Edwards could be a free agent the following summer. And if that situation ever completely devolved, which again, this is so far out in the future, we don't know what's going to happen, like, then that one becomes all the way pretty interesting, because he would probably ask out right before that. 2029, pretty good. Did you know next year in 2025, the Jazz have a Cavs and or Minnesota pick? It's not just like they'll have this one or that one. They have the option of both or one or none, I think, And I've never seen that before. We're so deep in these fucking pick machinations that it's a whole like cottage industry unto itself.
I'm hearing a lot of reasons the Jazz should not be on the no power rankings. You know, they got a lot to work with.
They've just offended the sensibilities. Also, Cody Williams probably sucks.
Kyle Filipowski's transgressions cannot stand.
Filipowski, one of the more interesting draft prospects of my life. I'll tell you that much. Go look that up, folks.
No,
definitely a friend to veterans. Yeah.
All right. He's had his moment. He's actually had his moments lately too. We should say
plays well with veterans. Yeah.
Boy.
So I have them at number 3 on the no power rankings.
God.
I had Wizards at 2. Woz, do you have any teams that we haven't talked about yet?
Yes, just one team that we haven't talked about. That's my number 2, the New Jersey Nets.
Oh,
yeah.
Well,
they moved back to New Jersey.
Yeah, that's how bad things are. They're
the
back.
Brooklyn Nets.
They had to go back to the Izod Center because things are so bad now.
The Brooklyn Nets from the swamp of New Jersey and East Rutherford. Yeah, the same kind of thing with the Bulls, who are my number 1, honestly, team going nowhere fast. The same kind of thing with the Bulls and the Wizards. Nobody on the team that you like, that you're like, oh, man, you know what? They have a keeper. This guy's going to be a part of the next great Nets team. This is going to be on the next conference finals. Next team is on this roster right now. No, There's not a single person you can point to. And so they're basically at the bottom, at ground zero of trying to figure out how to become, one of the more competitive teams in the league again. And for me, that's just why. And it's not like they're not like the Jazz, who they could be like, well, we have these sort of lottery tickets on these other teams that maybe if, 2 guys go down and we get a good, lottery pick out of it. And like, they don't have any of that. And so that's why I got the Nets. For me, that their future just looks so bleak.
It's not good. To borrow the JV bit, and as you just laid out, was like, who do you honestly anticipate will still be on this roster when they are good again? Their best players are more likely to be traded than not. Cam Johnson was on the trade block all season, basically. I would still anticipate he gets moved at some point. Nick Claxton also feels like he's probably in that same camp. To the extent that D'Lo is going to be part of the plan, he doesn't actually advance it forward in any meaningful way. And so then you're getting into Cam Thomas, if you want to keep him, which you're going to have to pay to do. Keon Johnson, Jalen Wilson, plenty of players who are perfectly fine and no real concrete direction whatsoever yet, other than kind of scrambling and splashing around the middle here to be vaguely competitive. And I want to give them credit for that, and credit to Jordi Fernandez for giving these guys something to play for, but they just don't have much of a sense of momentum or direction in any particular way. And there is no prospect whatsoever that you can feel really confident is going to be a star.
So do you have them on your list, Rob?
They're my number 1 team.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You guys both have them in the top 2. I have them not on my list at all.
Wow.
That's crazy.
What do you see happening?
You just geeked off of Killian Hayes, ain't you?
Yeah. That 1 for 6 performance against the Detroit Pistons. Really
Day'Ron Sharp just got you going crazy over there in Portland.
I think I'm just giving more credence to the market than perhaps you guys, because they're another team that I could see flipping things around and getting back into the mix pretty quickly. It's just like guys want to be in New York, guys want to be in Brooklyn. They attracted 2 of the biggest superstars in the league a couple years ago and could easily do it again. I also just we talk about De Niro and Casino, like the Nets love this shit. They love unearthing.
First of all, we are not talking about De Niro and Casino. You were talking about De Niro and Casino. Did you watch it this weekend? What happened?
No, but it's something I've always thought about when it comes to just like someone just getting back to what they do well. I don't know. It's just stuck in my head for that reason.
It's you during variable season?
I know. I just need to get to the big old glasses and some brightly colored suits, and I'll be back in this game. No, they're so good at turning these C-level players into B-level players, and I think they're already showing signs of doing that again. To the point where they were so good this year with just like a bunch of bums that like they have to stop themselves from being too good. I think Nicholas Claxton, we talk about guys who might not be there. I think he's going to be there for his entire career at this point.
You think so?
He's going to be the Miles Turner of the Nets, where it's like, oh man, he's going to be in rumors every year, but he's actually in our Hall of Fame. I don't know. They always find guys. They have enough here, and I think that plus the market is the reason I didn't put them on the list.
They do find guys, but it's also a huge part of their season has just been like they sign like Tosan Iwoman to a like a two-way contract, and all of a sudden he's playing 25 minutes a night. Like that's what this roster is right now, is there's room for random guys to come out of the scrap heap, to come out of free agency and be meaningful every night contributors, not because they are overwhelmingly positive in their contributions, but just because there's nothing else really going on here.
And, I like that Nick Claxton is their most highest paid player at only $27 million. So what does that mean? Like, if this were the type of NBA where a lot of great players became eligible in free agency, you'd be like, look, they're well positioned to sign the next great free agent. But they're not. Players don't come up for free agency. So it's like, even with their cap flexibility, I'm like, I don't know. Like, how are they going to actually make that work outside of doing stuff like what Utah would do a lot in facilitating, being a third team, facilitating trades, and getting assets that way. But again, you have to be bad in order to be the kind of team that does those kinds of moves. I just think, like, yes, their present isn't, the Bobcats that won 6 games that one year. Yes, in the present, they're not that. So that's nice. But in the future, like how do they get back to, that moment when they first traded for James Harden, where we were like, holy shit, these guys are championship contenders.
Yeah.
How do they get back to that? I think, don't see it.
I think the fact that they're following the same exact blueprint that got them to that point almost gives me more faith that they could do it again. Like,
Yeah,
but they
But there's not
D'Angelo
even a Jared
Russell,
Allen here.
Bro, you got to
I
bank.
mean, like,
they
haven't had enough drafts to find that guy yet. But like,
Well,
Daron
you
Sharp
gotta
is like a totally
bank
fine
on somebody
backup.
as good as KD saying he wanted to hitch his career wagon to Kyrie. That's what they banked. Like, that's a
I mean, they definitely didn't have good taste in like locker room guys. I'll say that. They didn't put enough emphasis on that, but maybe they'll learn from those mistakes. I just like this team isn't like putrid. And if anything, there aren't like bad contracts. They have picks. They have a 2027 Philadelphia 76ers pick, which looks mighty good right now. There's just like stuff in that, plus the market, plus like the infrastructure. Like, I don't know. I don't think they're that dire. For instance, like the Wizards are the perfect counterpoint to this, where it's like the Wizards are doing the same exact thing, but they don't have the same market muscle, plus like some of the track record to show to guys in the past. Like, come to our team, we'll bring out the best version of you. Spencer Diddy, for instance.
Justin must be spending his summers in Australia or something. Something's up with this Nets bias. I don't know what's going on over there.
I think you're overstating what this is relative to what the Nets were in that kind of developmental heyday, where they were just busting out Joe Harris's and Spencer Dinwiddie's and Jared Allen's like nothing. Like, this is a team that to me has like three guys who are like the 5th best player on a team, and then like 5 guys who are like the 8th best player on a team, if that. And that's not great.
I don't disagree, but I also don't think they've had a long time to build up this
Definitely
sort of
not.
Jared Allen's in the draft. And so I think they'll get those eventually. They have a good eye for players, and I think that matters.
I hope so. I will say somebody needs, I don't know whether it's the Nets, somebody needs to sign Trendon Watford to a real contract next season on a good winning team. That guy can fucking play. Free advice out there for anyone looking to how to use your 2 ways, how to use your 10 days, under contract right now. But somebody get Trendon Watford out of here, please.
Blazers legend, Trendon Watford.
Absolutely.
So you guys are all done. You have all your teams out there.
All my teams. There's just one honorable mention team for me.
I still have
your number one, I guess.
Which you guys don't have on your.
Who's your number one team? No.
Yeah, the Phoenix Sun is honorable mention for me.
Yeah.
Guys, this
But
is
it's
so
just
fucking
only
bad.
because the situation is dire. It's so gross right now. But they're 2 guys they're going to get plus value for. And players, more so than the Knicks, more so than Chicago, more so than the Nets. Players have demonstrated that they really like playing in Phoenix.
Sure.
Like, players fucking like Phoenix for whatever reason. I don't know. They love it. And so they can get off of KD, get off of Booker, get a lot of shit, and be fine again.
Do you guys remember in free agency where LaMarcus Aldridge was looking around and he had that meeting with Phoenix where like Tyson Chandler popped out of a closet and is just like, hey, you want to come down to Phoenix? Those are the good old days, man. I fucking miss free agency. See, I disagree with that assessment though. Like, I actually think if you look at it, I worry that what their return they get will actually be worse than a team that has control over their own draft picks. So the Suns don't control their draft until like 2050 at this point. I think it's actually 2031, which is the longest at this point that they can go to. So in 2032, they're hoping to get their future back. I think KD being a free agent after the following season will limit the return. I also wonder if like KD's starting to ward off some teams where it's just like, why am I going to ruin my future in order to bring KD in? And so will they get like a helpful player or two and like a pick or two? Sure, but I don't know if that's going to be a total bonanza like they gave up in order to get him. Fine, right? And so I think eventually that will mean Devin Booker will probably want out. Then you will probably get a big old haul. But I don't think the picks you're getting from those teams are going to be bad. It's just like the Cavs and the Wolves. Like you're getting back bad picks as opposed to the main asset of tanking is that your own picks are the worst. By and large, I would say like 95% of the time, the picks that ultimately land you the superstar from tanking are your own picks because you are so putrid. They don't have that possibility. And so I think they're going to be treading water in the like very mediocre zone for a very long time. That's like what, like 7 seasons out? I don't see where the help is coming from because there's no like direct path to a full-blown superstar as opposed to actually signing someone in free agency, which they might do, but really hasn't happened in the past for the Suns.
I think we're just zooming past the part where Devin Booker is a top 15, 12 player in the league right now.
Totally.
Like, no questions asked. He is that. He will have a market that is substantial. I take everything that you're saying seriously as far as like how rebuilding teams actually rebuild.
And get
like
a young guy who can hoop for Devin Booker in there. It don't gotta be all picks. Like get your. He's not gonna be Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, but get your thing like that in the trade along with picks. Like it doesn't have to.
So can we do this out then? So let's say, so I think Houston's an interesting example, right? Like I actually think they would be better off waiting for Booker than going for KD. And it sounds like the rumor mill kind of suggests the same thing. Let's just say they're going for Devin Booker. They're at the negotiating table. Who are we giving up here? Let's say it's like
Amen
Cam
Thompson.
Whitmore.
Thank you.
I don't
Come
know
right on
Thompson.
down.
I think
right
it's more
down.
like Jalen Green, Cam Whitmore, Reed Shepherd, perhaps, all very good young players. I don't know if that's like functionally changing your situation.
Well,
and so
that's when you hang up. That's when you hang up the phone and you call Sam Presti and you say, "I would like Jalen Williams and I would like a collection of your first round picks that you have in store." Right? Like you start getting or you call the Utah Jazz. You get that 2031 pick back, and maybe by then they have some actually like developed prospects that they can send you.
That's still like 7 years from now. That's a long time to be sucking.
I'm not saying that they will be sucking that long. I'm just saying, like, I think Devin Booker creates a healthy market in the event that he wants to leave. And I'm not jumping to the conclusion that he wants to leave. I think he could be one of those guys who just sort of hangs around. God knows he has already been on enough bad Phoenix Suns teams. And maybe that has like conditioned him to it, or maybe it'll make him want to leave faster. But ultimately, if you have a player as good as Devin Booker, I just don't see how low things can really, really go as far as like an overall franchise. It's like the vibes are horrendous. No one is enjoying playing for the Phoenix Suns right now. But as far as the future of the team, you still have Devin Booker and you still have whatever future you have with Kevin Durant.
I hear that. I think it's going to be Devin Booker and like Naz Reid just like hoping and praying that they're going to fire up 53s a game per player and just like hoping that they can win a game. Because like,
I like that team.
I love Devin.
Would watch.
It could be fun. Yeah. Speaking of Naz Reid, though, do you guys have any like feel of where Kevin Durant could go? Because it seems like this is like a foregone conclusion at this point. Like, do you have any favorites? Do you have any like ones that you want to see happen?
That I would like to see happen. My favorite one that I've heard is him going to the Wizards. Just go back home.
Going back home.
Try to make
DMV.
them relevant. You won't have no championship expectations. We've seen what happened with championship expectations for this guy the last, 6 years. It's been a waste of everybody's time. So why don't we go the opposite direction? Instead of a team chasing a championship, you go to a team that's just trying to become relevant. You're raising their floor. several levels, finally giving your hometown something to love and to root for. I'm stealing this from Carmelo Anthony, who's from, Baltimore area, Maryland, DC area guy. But yeah, I would love to see him go to the Wizards because this whole KD, get him to a contender, hope that he stays happy even as he gets every single thing that he wants and blah, blah. Like, I'm sick of that. Like, go to DC. Know what I mean?
Build something with Koulibaly.
Yes, build something with Koulibaly and Sarr.
Sending Kevin Durant at, what is Kevin Durant, 36 years old right now?
Yeah.
To play with the Washington Wizards after he's having, for everything that's going on in Phoenix, one of the best like individual scoring seasons in the league in terms of like self-generated offense. Like he's still Kevin Durant, and you want him to go out there and babysit Bilal Koulibaly?
Sarr looking like a complete piece.
No,
you never know what he can do next to KD.
I would love KD on one of these teams that has a good defense and doesn't quite know what to do offensively yet. Like the Miami Heat are desperate for shit right now. They are desperate for something to go their way offensively, and they are blowing leads left and right.
The last 2 times he moved teams.
They did. And
they thought they were getting him during the Brooklyn time. They thought they were getting him when the sun swooped in.
And this kind of thing is why I was reluctant to put the Heat on a list like this, despite the fact that it's not looking great right there right now. But
too much respect for Rouse.
Too much respect. 2 stars who are young enough to put some things together. Like that team is going to change shape, and maybe it changes shape for someone like Kevin Durant. Maybe the Orlando Magic could get in a conversation like that.
He's the next Will Chamberlain. I mean, not Will Chamberlain. Sorry,
Where?
You mean Bill Russell?
Bill Russell.
Wow. One thing that I heard being bandied about as kind of an offshoot of the Rockets conversation is like, could the Spurs get in on that? Is that a crazy idea? Is that moving too much too fast for them to trade for Fox and then swing for Kevin Durant? It absolutely would. I don't really see it for that reason. And frankly, as far as people you want Victor Wembanyama and De'Aaron Fox to be able to grow into roles with, Kevin Durant is not the guy I would handpick for that. But maybe if they decide they want to push fast and like really steer into whatever they think is going right for them, maybe you could talk yourself into it. I don't see it though.
I think Miami and Houston are the front runners for all the reasons you guys laid out. I think Miami is probably what he needs, the sort of rigorous culture that will keep him in line and like keep everyone else in line and just let him do whatever he wants to do. Houston has the assets.
You think KD wants to be kept in line by an organization?
I think he wants to not deal with that stuff. I think he just wants to do what he does, fair. Which is be the best possible basketball player and hand off the managerial duties. Because let me tell you, trying to do both, manager and participant, becomes tough sometimes.
Does it?
Yes.
You want to tell us about it?
Get your ass out of here, Verrier.
I think the reunion stuff is fun. There's no way he goes back to OKC, but like sometimes KD can be so like left field with these things. I could see it happening. He's not Golden State. Like I could also see him like getting to the summer and being like, actually, I've changed my opinion entirely with Golden State. Let me get back to there. And I just want to get back with Jimmy Butler and not have the version of the Suns that we didn't have.
What if they guarantee him a shit ton of money? Like, do we think the team that gets KD is going to guarantee 3 years of max money?
I have no idea.
Extension? Like a la Joel Embiid this summer?
Probably. I think KD can age pretty well just because of how he shoots it. But and if you do trade for him, I assume it comes with the territory. The one other team I do want to talk about just before we go here is the Wolves. I don't know if you guys saw that around the trade deadline where it's like Edwards and KD are friends.
Right.
I don't know. I like it. The Wolves are a little bit more bold than I think people give them credit for. Like the Gobert trade, that was fucking bold. Like the Towns move.
Yeah.
So they seem to be more, they're at the table with an itchy finger sort of team. And I could see them pulling something like that off.
It also felt like the thing at the time where it was registering interest, even when from a practical perspective, a trade like that was almost impossible to execute. It was like, we just want to put this in your head, Kevin Durant / Phoenix Suns, that like, we're out here. So we want to have this conversation. Let's talk in the summer.
This is a Rudy swap?
I don't even know mechanically
think
what
you would
would
have to
swing
be
it at
like
this stage. McDaniel's
Jaden
probably involved, I would think.
Daniels involved
Well, here's the thing, like,
somehow.
Randall's an expiring. So if he opts into his next year, he's an expiring at that point. He becomes a little bit easier to trade. That's most of the way. You're like
Justin, let me tell you
3/5
something.
of the way money
He's
wise.
opting into his deal next year.
I bet. I think you're right.
He does not have a scintillating market, bro.
And then like Naz Reid, free agent, can he get thrown into the mix there if he's already on his way out?
Yeah,
it could happen.
I would enjoy that.
It'd be kind of fun, and it's kind of a left
It
field
would be.
option that I don't think anyone's expecting.
I do like it.
Suns, 9 players under contract next year, $208 million. They would already be over the 2nd apron. So
Light work.
not on your guys' list though.
Nope, not on my list.
Light work. Light work. Have you
Gotta
seen
believe
the
in
housing market?
the Suns
Their
organization.
owner he's good for it.
It's true. All right, let's wrap it there. Thank you to Isaiah Blakely on production. Thank you to Ben Cruz for filling in on the video side of things. We'll be back. Talk to you then. Must be 21 plus and present in select states for Kansas in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino or 18 plus and present in DC. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit rg-help.com. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York.